All right, so thank you all for coming. I'm Dr. Matthew Stallard of the Ohio University Department of English, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this, our fourth annual Futures in English Symposium. We're glad you're here, and I welcome you on behalf of the English Department Undergraduate Placement Committee. And so we know there's some good things that you'll be able to take away and to apply to your chosen pathway career. We want to recognize and thank our Undergraduate Placement Committee, Dr. Elizabeth Kuntz, who is the chair of the committee, Dr. Jessica Hollis, Dr. Beth Quitzland, and Dr. Tom Scanlon. Appreciate the work they did in planning and arranging this important event. It is a good time for you to be an English major. The English major has a long and distinguished history in Ohio University education. It is an outstanding and well-worn roadway to a fulfilling and rewarding career. And the world needs thoughtful, compassionate, liberal arts educated young people contributing in their communities, in their institutions, and in the workplace. But don't just accept what I have to say about this. We have an illustrious panel here that's going to share their experience. They have agreed to make themselves available at your beck and disposal. All English majors who have generously donated their time and energy to be with us today. So I want to help you get to know each of them by telling you a little about each of them. Matthew Beamer is a New York City-based journalist and audience engagement editor at Money, a personal finance magazine and website owned by Time Incorporated. Beamer started his career as an intern at Babcock's Media, an Akron, Ohio-based automotive publishing company, in January of 2013. Within a year, he was promoted twice to assistant editor of Motorcycle and Power Sports News in March, and again in December to associate editor of Tire Review and Fleet Equipment. In June 2015, he left Babcock's to join Money as audience engagement editor, where he manages the brand's social media team. In that role, he helped lead Money's editorial strategy, including major franchises like Best Places to Live and Best Colleges, Social Video, and Facebook Live. He graduated from the Ohio University College of Arts and Sciences with a BA in English Literature in 2013. As a student, he worked as a resident assistant in Gammertsfelter Hall, served as public relations director and social media manager at the All Campus Radio Network, ACRN, and interned at Alternative Press. Candace Boninger is Associate Vice Provost for Enrollment Management and Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Ohio University. Since her appointment in 2011, Boninger has led the office through a period of extraordinary change, expanding the portfolio of audiences served, implementing new technologies, and developing new strategies to achieve enrollment goals. In that same period, the university has experienced continuous significant growth, enrolling the largest, best qualified, and most diverse classes in the institution's history. She's actively involved in several professional organizations and has presented at state, regional, and national meetings. She serves as president of the Ohio Association for College Admission Counseling and as chair of the Ohio Public Universities Admissions Council. She earned a bachelor's degree in English and Spanish with secondary education certification at Samford University and a master's in English language and literature from the University of Tennessee. Prior to joining Ohio in 2002, she worked for a software firm in the construction materials industry. Next, we have Brittany Cardin, who is the marketing and events manager at St. Joseph's Orphanage in Cincinnati. She began her career as a marketing intern for the Cincinnati Center City Development Corporation, a local nonprofit charged with revitalizing downtown Cincinnati. After receiving several promotions, Cardin found herself responsible for promoting hundreds of annual events for two of Cincinnati's premier civic spaces. She was also tasked with working with various city officials and neighborhood stakeholders to raise awareness about ongoing community-based development efforts. She now works for St. Joseph Orphanage, Cincinnati's oldest and most historic social service agency. Cardin graduated with a bachelor's degree in English in 2011. As a student, she worked as a resident assistant in Bryan Hall and was probably O'Betty's best customer, so she said. Maria Elena Iannarino is an assistant creative director at Resource Amirati, an IBM company in Columbus. Iannarino began her career as a copywriter more than 7 years ago and has had the privilege of creating on behalf of brands like Purina Cat Chow, Kraft Heinz, P&G Hair Care, Sherwin-Williams, and more. She has an extensive portfolio which includes California Pizza Kitchen and Herbal Essences. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in English in 2007. Her fondest memories of Athens include being a grill cook at the Oasis, drinking iced coffees in Ellis Hall, and walking along the bike path of a hot summer day. So folks, this is truly a wonderful panel worthy of our attention. Here's the roadmap. We have some prefabricated questions that we're going to ask our panelists, and then we'd like to open it up to you to also be able to ask some questions directly to our panel. So panelists, let's begin with this. What is your best Ohio University memory?
So I was really involved in ACRN, which is a music organization on campus. My favorite memory was organizing in my senior year. Lobster Fest was just a giant concert for the Rock Lobster is our mascot. But and it's also what I miss a lot about Athens is the music community that kind of thrives here. Not that New York doesn't have it, but it's such a smaller town that you just know everyone and everything going on. So take advantage of it.
So my first favorite memory is seeing a squirrel at the Oasis, double fist, a full Krispy Kreme donut, and just gnawing at it. And I thought, wow, I'm in the wild culture. But seriously, I took a graduate course here. I didn't go to didn't go to Ohio University. I'm outed, I guess. But I did take a graduate course here to renew my teaching license when we first moved. And it was Literature for Young Adults by Dr. Joan McMath over in the Patton College. And she had all of us on the first day of class sit on the floor, and she read a story to us. And it was just a really compelling visual, a reminder of how important that phase and that piece of instruction was in all of our lives that probably got most of us to where we are now, being read to. And it was just a really important moment academically, even though it was after I had earned my degrees.
That squirrel is my spirit animal. I actually worked at the Oasis. It was at the top of Morton Hill, and it was called the Oasis because you were about to die, but then there was like a thing and you were done walking up the hill. And because I worked there, had the privilege of running out of Ellis when class would go on that 10-minute break when you have the longer classes and everybody goes out to smoke. I would scurry across the street and run into the Oasis and run behind the counter and make an iced coffee. And I remember the way that coffee tasted. Like, it's different than, Starbucks and different than the coffee that I drink now. And then running back into Dr. Scanlon's class for the rest of class and checking out what everybody had to say. And it was so nice.
When I first came to OU, I was a psych major with an English minor. And then halfway through my college career, I flipped it. But there was a professor that I took, a psychology professor. His name was Gary Sarver, and I don't know if he's still here. But I took every class that he offered because he was challenging, but at the same time, he was really funny. And he loved to make his students nervous. And so I remember sitting in the front row of class one day. We were like 20, 30 minutes into class. And all of a sudden, a student stood up, slammed his books on the counter and said, "I can't effing take this crap anymore," and stormed out. And our whole class was just... we were just like beside ourselves, and we looked over at Gary Sarver, Dr. Sarver, and he was just in stitches. He was on the floor, and we were like, "What is wrong with you?" And he said, he had a delivery of exotic fish. He asked me this morning if he could leave early, and I told him, of course, as long as he did it that way. So that's my favorite.
So tell us a little bit about your career path since graduating from Ohio University. Where has it taken you?
Yeah. I started, I should back up. Right when I graduated, probably like some of you, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I had passions, I had interests, and all of those things got me a month in my parents' house, just kind of searching around for jobs. Took a lot of informational interviews and went to a lot of job fairs, people introducing me to other people, and found Babcock's Media in Akron, where I'm really passionate about media and had taken internships and worked a little bit with Scripps while I was here to work on reporting and those things. So I took that job, started out as an intern, as you know, you may have to as well, but that quickly evolved into a full-time position. Spent 2 years there. It was a very small company, and I felt like I really got it and was able to connect with people and kind of move in different directions at that company. Even if I didn't know anything about motorcycles, which I don't, I was able to go from there to learning about tires. At the same time, I was keeping up with my friends that I graduated with. I had a friend in the College of Communications who was working at Time Magazine. We were bouncing ideas off of each other that entire time, and he approached me and said, "We've got a position open at a sister brand, Money. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, let me come out." I interviewed for it, took the edit test. They made an offer, and I moved out to New York. So I found the job through a Bobcat. So there's hope.
I think you'll hear networking is quite the theme, and not in the rigid way that we sometimes think of it. My first job actually was still while I was in college. I had a sorority sister who had graduated, and she worked for this software company that was located across the street from where we went to college. And she was a tech writer. She had more work than she could do. Her boss said that she could take on a little bit of part-time help, and so she offered it to me. So my first job using my English degree, if you don't think that waiting tables and stuff used it, I think that it did, was to write user manuals back when they actually published user manuals for software instead of just doing online help. And it was about how to sell concrete using this very specific software system and how to bill for it and account for it. I did that part-time through the rest of college. And then I went on to grad school because I was going to be an English professor. And not just any English professor, but that cool one like Beth Quitzlin. The cool one who has class outside and sits on the desk and inspires everybody to dream. And I really enjoyed my graduate program. I started in a master's program that was 2 years, so I did an assistantship. And then about halfway through, though, I felt like I wanted to see a more practical application of the skills that I had developed. I was studying a lot of social justice literature by women, and I was exposed for the first time in my graduate program. Interesting that I wasn't exposed in my undergraduate program, but exposed for the first time to issues of feminism. And I just felt like I wanted to sort of get out of academics and do work that mattered, but I had no idea what that was. I just knew that I didn't want to keep going. So I finished with my master's, and that same company was still hiring. So I went back to work for them first as a technical writer while I got my life together, and then took on positions in project implementation, technical training, ended up traveling for them about 40 weeks a year all over the country in different kinds of construction materials, plants and offices. And then everything changed because I fell in love. And my husband-to-be at the time, who also was a humanities major, had taken his first job as a librarian here at Ohio University. And so I moved to Athens, and through some networking, learned of a position in the admissions office that was working on the communication materials that an admissions office uses, the view book and the brochures and very early website stuff, e-newsletters. So I took that position, and then through some significant changes in the office, my technical skills became really integral, and I fell in love with the field. And I found in this work that meaningful employment that I was really hoping for in terms of changing lives, because I probably signed all of your admit letters. And it's just been really exciting to use these skills in a transformative way for me. But that's not a knock on graduate study in English. I would love to talk to somebody about how to prepare yourself for that in a way that I didn't feel like I was at the time. I'll go back someday.
So when I got into Ohio University, I had declared as a dietetics major because it's always been a passion of mine, nutrition. And then I looked at the course list, and there was a class in there called Gross Anatomy. Do you know what that is? It's like cutting open dead people. And I was like, you know what? Actually, I think I know words. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I was really intimidated by the science coursework, which, by the way, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, I would never do that now. If I saw something that was like not in my wheelhouse or complete or like really scary, like that was scary to me, I wouldn't discount myself in the same way that I did. But it was good because it led me to English. Then after college, I was really, it was 2007 when I graduated. Do you know what happened in 2008? Market, housing, yeah, it was bad. People were not generous with jobs, especially for, liberal arts majors. And so I took anything I could get, which included some grunt work of, I managed a tanning salon, thank you, for from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. And then I would leave there and I would go serve dinner at a restaurant until 10 o'clock. And then I would leave there and I would go bartend because my loans were due. And I was trying to get out there. But I applied to an ad agency, the same one I actually work at now. And they said, sorry, lady, where's your portfolio? You didn't have an internship. Yeah, you're a green banana. We can't do anything for you. So I went out and found a job as a database administrator using a program called SharePoint to take this wealth planning firm from a paper system to a paperless system. And they were like, can you do this? And I was like, of course. I know exactly how to do that. No, not at all. But books exist and the internet exists. And because I can read and write really well, I taught myself how to do this bizarre job that I didn't even know was a thing. And like the weirdest part is like I was good at it. Like I did this technical software stuff that I never would have thought I could do. Long story short, the skills I learned putting an intranet together and doing content management, along with my English Lit degree and creative writing experience, suddenly made me a candidate for that copywriter job I tried to get when I graduated. So I went back and I tried again, and they rolled the dice on me. So that's how I ended up in an agency. And I remember my first day, they handed me this assignment for Herbal Essences. And it's a branded email. If you ever signed up for an email from a brand, somebody makes those, it's me. And I said, well, what should it say? And they said, you tell us. And I was like, oh, God, is that my job? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Oh, my gosh. So I just figured it out. And here I am, 7.5 years later.
I graduated from OU in 2011. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I came in as a psychology major with an English minor because I've always loved, the study of the brain and why we are who we are, and what helps dictate our actions. Anyways, I thought I was really profound, but I woke up one day, I was a junior, and I had this realization after years of wanting to pursue psychology. I realized that I couldn't have someone sitting on my couch telling me about their problems because I would yell at them to suck it up, and I would make no money. So I decided to kind of flip things a little bit. I said, I've always had a passion for literature and reading and writing and putting words to a page, so I fully invested myself in English. But with that came okay, so you want to be a teacher, or you better get really used to working retail like you have been because those are your only options. False. Just putting that out there in case you didn't know that. False.
Couldn't be okay.
But I was a little down on myself because, a couple months after graduation, I was still working at Sears. I was still, asking if people found everything okay. And I hadn't found everything okay because I had no job. But, and through networking, a Bobcat, who actually turned out to be the CEO of the company that I started working for, talked to a relative of mine, heard about me, heard that I was looking to get my feet wet, and said, well, she's a Bobcat, come on in. She can intern for a month or so and see if she likes marketing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what marketing entailed, but okay, it paid $13 an hour. Yes. So, I was their intern, and it was, like you said, a lot of grunt work. It was things that I either had no experience with but I was willing to hustle and I was willing to figure it out. I personally have no problem saying I don't know something as long as I follow it up with, but give me time, I'll figure it out. And that kind of attitude, it let me work my way up through that organization. And before I knew it, I was doing all of the marketing for two of Cincinnati's biggest, most exciting civic spaces. I was promoting over 600 events a year. I was doing their websites, I was doing their e-newsletters, all of their press releases, all of their media appearances, trying to get people to come to these events, which was great. And then February of 2016, I took a job with St. Joseph Orphanage, which is not event marketing in any way or construction marketing. Instead, it's exploring more of the philanthropic side of things as well as the educational aspect of marketing and healthcare. So I do the marketing for Cincinnati's oldest social service agency now. So it's a whole different ballgame, but that's kind of how I got from there to here.
Oh, very interesting. So tell us how the English degree prepared you for the workplace.
Yeah, so let me gather myself. What you're going to find out is that you have very practical skills that are going to help you in very fundamental ways. As a journalist, it really helped that I had a strong background in critical thinking and textual analysis, and being able to really see multiple sides of an argument, really dive deep into dense subjects and be able to come out with interesting stories or an angle into this that kind of explains it in a clear and coherent way. As kind of a side to this too, we were talking. There's often a catch-22 when you're applying for jobs. It's that you're not experienced because you don't have the skills that you might need to be a reporter, but you do have these practical ways of thinking and ways of arguing that are really worth it. So that's why I encourage internships and really testing out, trying to develop those skills that might an employer might be looking for, but you do have very practical skills that will help you throughout your career.
And I would add to that on the practical skills side, I almost would categorize them as clinical skills. And that was something that I didn't really realize about myself even until this past November. We sold a house and bought a house, and we had to move and reestablish our bookshelves. And as I was unpacking this box of texts, I was bringing out my graduate and undergraduate English textbooks, which for whatever reason I held on to. And they included titles in rhetoric, and argument and persuasion. And there was another book that I'm sure the English faculty are aware of, Texts and Context. There were skills that I learned very clinically in terms of how to construct an argument that it took me a while. It was just a revelation to me to realize that my colleagues who come to work with me every day may not have had that same preparation. And that might actually help me understand why sometimes we don't communicate very well, or why I might feel a little impatient with another person's ability to make an argument or not make an argument. But I think that clinical precision of the ability to communicate an idea is fundamental, in addition to sort of the broader themes of analysis and critical thinking and just sort of the ability to handle big ideas and take on different perspectives. Empathy, I think, are really important fundamental things. But don't discount that when your professor gives you back a paper and tells you that your sentence structure is convoluted, that you actually have an opportunity to learn something there and improve in a way that somebody who might be pursuing a different degree and doesn't have that same expert set of eyes on their ideas, they're just not going to get that same feedback. So it gives you a competitive advantage to some extent.
This is all really good advice. I feel like I'm getting advice sitting here listening to all of this. I would say that, well, in my field of advertising, it's storytelling. On behalf of a brand, advertising is storytelling. And especially now, the different ways that we advertise, social media, which I'm sure you're all pros at, you've got about 5 seconds to hook somebody's attention. And what we as English majors and as writers are able to do is take what we learned in classes like creative writing, in poetry. Poetry was the one I would get the most flack for. When I would tell people I'm in a poetry class, they like imagined me like coring apples and like smoking joints under trees and like just screwing around. But really what you learn is how to distill powerful emotion into as few words as possible. And what you're left with is sentiment that where every word is fighting for its life. And you end up being able to move people very deeply. Think about some of the ads you've seen. I mean, the Super Bowl's coming up, you know. Watch some of those ads and just think about the way that they make you feel. And that the weapon wielded there is words. And no one is better equipped to wield that weapon than you are. So I found very practical applications for things as seemingly initially trivial as poetry that have actually really helped me in my career. And by the way, I have to say this, it's off topic, but it is awesome to see a crowd full of ladies. I just have to like give you guys a little round of applause. This is really cool, really, really cool.
Agreed.
It's just like, wow.
You know what? For me, I really feel like my degree in English prepared me because I walked out the door knowing how to do research and understanding that sometimes it's not a quick thing. Sometimes it takes hours, it takes days, it takes more effort than you might think that it would, because I was used to, exploring articles and sources and digging up whatever evidence I could to support whatever paper I was writing or whatever thesis or whatever idea I was trying to push. So as I started exploring my career in marketing, as much as I had the ability to write and put words on a page and try to paint a picture with them, and walking out the door, I thought I could do that pretty well. It's one of my strong suits. There were other aspects of marketing I had to learn, things that I would never have thought of. And even as an intern, my supervisor said to me, I don't expect you to know everything, but I need you to figure it out. Fair point. So I got a little wiggle room. I got a little grace period. So that meant when I went home in the evening, I would hit the books. And by books, I mean at this point, Google. And try to figure out how can I improve this? What's the little things from, is this the right place to put a comic here? Or what's the best time of day to send out an e-newsletter? Or how are people structuring their press releases now? How are they using social media? So I really think having those strong research skills, even today, 6 years into my career, has really helped me and continues to help me.
So with an awareness that you were all once sitting right there as students, what advice would you like to give to current English majors?
Yeah. And I said this earlier, I think you should continue to learn. And to challenge yourself in ways that may not be comfortable. You're going to end up in careers or career paths that you may have never even thought that you'd be in. I was writing about tires, and I don't know anything about tires. But you're in the same way that you struggle with difficult texts, but you find a way into it and a way that these texts speak to you. I found that in tires. I really came to love the invisible things, the invisible designs that go into tires. Everything from the chemistry of it to actually what the regulations and things like that go into this. So challenge yourself. Try to find interesting things in everything you do, and keep on learning. It's going to make you great in your career, and it's going to make you great as a citizen, too.
I think one of the common themes on all of our stories is, for at least some phase of work life, being willing to do grunt work. Sort of a job that maybe doesn't inspire, not that tires can't be inspiring, or, batching yards of concrete can't be inspiring. But I think it took me a little bit to learn that what I do to earn my paycheck can be meaningful and fulfilling, but it doesn't have to always be meaningful and fulfilling every single moment of every single day. And there are other ways that I can impact the world, even using the same skills outside of a work life. But I think just having some humility and being willing, I gave an example earlier of being willing to punch holes in those manuals that I was writing at the end of the day. I was in a writing job, by golly. Isn't there some intern or temp who could punch holes in paper? No, it was my contribution that it was something that I could do, and it was helpful for me to do it. And while I was engaged in some of those activities that were menial or tedious, or even while I was waiting tables for many, many years, making a whole lot of money actually doing it, you learn about how to engage with people and how to have empathy and how to build relationships. And you learn languages that are new and different. You guys all would have facility with languages, or else you wouldn't be in the field that you're pursuing. And so just taking advantage of that osmosis period when you may be doing something that doesn't feel necessarily compelling or inspiring toward that next phase of life, but you can actually pick up skills and talents and new information and perspectives along the way, and build trust with those people who are looking at you for what is that next thing that they might trust you with professionally. And if you're willing to do the little things, then they'll usually trust you with something a little bit bigger, and over time you can develop that into a productive career path.
Yeah. I would say don't panic. It's going to be okay. You're going to get past this weird, uneasy part of your life where you don't know what's coming next, where for 12 years you have known what's coming next because it's more school. You're going to be fine at this. And, have some confidence too, because, Matthew wasn't a tire expert, but I bet you know some stuff about tires now, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so, when I started writing on Sherwin-Williams, I was like, paint that goes on airplanes, I don't, but you're professional students, essentially. So don't discount yourself. Don't be that girl who looks at the science class and goes, I can't do this. Because in a job that you want, there's somebody else less prepared than you doing it. And that's a fact. And so you can do it too.
Agreed. To kind of piggyback off of that, don't sell yourself short, like she said. Instead, sell yourself. You are your own brand, and you need to treat yourself as such, because as you start your job hunt, that is essentially what you are doing. You are marketing yourself. You are marketing your skills. And at the same time that you want to hopefully connect with an employer or an opportunity that's going to benefit you, that's going to teach you something, you have to remember that it's also about what can you do for that organization, what can you do for that company, what skills do you bring to the table. You're going to end up doing some grunt work like everybody has said here, but I also want to emphasize the fact that while you are doing said grunt work, as unfortunate as it may be, as unglamorous as it may be, you need to hustle while you're doing it. Always be looking for the next project. Always look to ask, what else can I do? What else do you have? I'm finished with this. Do you have something else for me to do? Because it may not seem like it, but the more you start touching different projects, the more you start making those connections, the more knowledge you obtain, the more knowledge you amass. And before you know it, instead of just handing off a project to dude over here, they might ask you for your input. And before you know it, it's not just asking for your input, you're leading the project. It's all yours. It's your baby. And it's going to help you move up the ladder and on to the next opportunity.
Very good. Well, I would like to extend this conversation to our audience. So what questions do you have for our panel?
Not all at once.
It was overwhelming, wasn't it?
I just have so much information that I'm trying to process it before I can think of my question.
Yeah.
Cool. Are any of you guys published with creative writing? I'm in poetry classes. It's a dream. Is it attainable? Are any of you publishing your creative writing in journals or maybe writing books? I don't know.
Are you?
So technically, I'm published in a lot of places if you count ads. I've written radio spots, I've written TV commercials, I've written, at this point it's ridiculous, how many times I've been out in the real world and I've been like, oh my God, that's my billboard, I made that thing. But no, I know a lot of people who are, however, in my agency, There's a really, really good friend of mine. I already sold her to these ladies up here, but her name's Amy Turn Sharp, and she's a poet, and she is published. She's written a book. She's shown up in several different publications. And in Columbus, she runs this thing called Word Church, which is at this cool bar called Rambling House Soda Pop, and they make like soda from scratch, and people get up on stage. And it's an open mic. Yeah, it's super fun. And there's a lot of people in the publishing community that I know very well. My girlfriend Kristen Riccardotti just published a young adult novel, which is super hard to do because there's so many of them. And she just published it. It came out last week, and it's called You Don't Know My Name. Yep.
I'll keep an eye out.
And it's a book about this chick. It's kind of like, it reminds me of Hunger Games, like it's made for the movies. But anyway, writers know writers, and this networking stuff, you know, I mean, a bunch of us were given our careers by other Bobcats, so keep meeting people, keep talking to people, because we know people.
And there are two real important rounds of networking, I think. One is when you're trying to find the job, right? So you want to have those professional connections or get published. But there's another that is an information gathering phase. I know several of you at lunch mentioned that you're freshmen. It's not too early to sort of get some strength in your spine and just say, can I have 30 minutes of your time, and I want to ask you these questions.
Yes.
And just shoot away and see what happens. Because you might not get anything practical out of that conversation, but you're going to get information that helps you vet your decision-making process as you progress toward eventually having some sort of job.
Yeah, there are like a lot of writers and editors that I work with, and across the entire organization, that they publish outside of the magazine that they work for. Will freelance. Some people
Yeah.
take breaks to write books. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I you know, not everyone makes a whole career out of their publishing career, but
Yeah.
there's plenty of opportunity.
I find it's usually like people's side hustle.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it
writing and
definitely is.
publishing.
Yeah,
It's
and
hard.
Yeah, writing a novel is like not easy.
It's a task.
Yes,
That
or
is
a
for
book.
sure.
And then what you'll find is like I think there's like two there's like networking looks like a cross maybe, and there's networking this way, which is like someone you admire, someone who's older than you or more experienced, and then there's your peers too. And I think it's really important to keep your peers very close and stay up with them, because there are moments when someone may be working on advertising and may say, hey, I need some help with this project, and you may you may be able to work on other people's projects. So that's a cool way to get out there as well.
Do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, whether or not you have actually gone yourself, but do you guys recommend going to grad school directly after graduating? Because I've heard a lot of, I don't know, some people are wary of like saying like go directly after graduation. I've heard that you should wait a bit before you should go.
Same.
I have not gone back to grad school. I really would like to. My little sister, who graduated from OU a couple years back, she's actually going to UC and she's in law school, and she went immediately after. But she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She knew exactly what she wanted to study, and so she's fine, so she says, with the idea of paying back those loans, because she'll be utilizing, her degree that way. If you know exactly what you want to do and you have that fire, that drive, that passion, then go ahead, knock it out, get it out of the way. If you want to take, and it's my opinion, if you want to take some time, get your feet wet, and figure out, okay, not only do I want to go this direction, but I want to take these turns with this direction, or I want to go this way, take a couple years, and I think it'll put you on a better path.
So I guess I'm not exactly a graduate school dropout, because I did earn a master's degree. And I did go immediately after college. And I think emotionally, socially, I was maybe a little unprepared. My ultimate decision not to pursue was that I was sitting in a graduate seminar, and I had maybe 8 people in it. And I realized that the 2 hours that I was giving of my life in that moment were centered around coming into this class and proving to these 7 other people that I had a more insightful read of the text than they had. And that moment was really convicting for me. It's not that way forever. Other graduate programs and other graduate experiences are much more personally gratifying and fulfilling. But when I realized that I was spending those 2 hours in that way, and it wasn't stimulating for me, I was really good at it. I got straight A's in grad school, but it just wasn't how I wanted to be spending that time. And I didn't really have a backup plan because I wasn't clearly going to be the cool professor who sits on the desk anymore. That was really challenging. And so on one hand, I would say the momentum of going straight out of college to grad school is an important factor to consider because life can get in the way. So in some ways, I'm really glad that I did that because who knows? I mean, I'd probably still be working at the construction materials industry right now if I hadn't done that. But at the same time, I think I wasn't prepared to realize that the career goal that I had in mind would not be the ultimate outcome of that experience. And I didn't realize until about halfway through. And so I hadn't prepared myself to take from those earlier classes those lessons that might have been applied later. And as I realized, now I've realized, of course, I was learning how to put together a persuasive argument, and I was taking constructive criticism about my ability to write or not write. But that was a hard moment for me to realize. It felt like a failure. And so if you're just prepared to kind of go into it and understand that as even emerging with a degree in English, you may absolutely have no idea what graduate study in English is about. It's a very different animal, or can be. And that's okay. You can pursue it for sure.
I know that's you.
Me? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so much over here right now. It's kind of an unusual question, I guess, but what is like the strangest or wackiest job or project you've worked on with your English degree that kind of just like came out of left field and you're like, oh, and it could have been a turning point, it could not have been, but sort of had an impact on you, and you're like, English majors can do stuff. You don't need to do science, and sort of had that moment of actualization.
Hey.
If you have a moment like
Yeah,
that.
it's a good question. I mean, my career path doesn't seem all that out of left field. I work with a lot of English majors and that kind of, those folks there. I will say, I've never thought I'd have to deal with numbers so much in my job. Like, as running social feeds and working with audiences, I use it's very data informed. So it kind of lends credibility to the research thing. Like, I realize working with numbers is really just like digging into text and kind of figuring out what's that telling me there. It's not like I do complicated algebra or anything. I'm just doing Excel sheets. But I think you'll find that we have a breadth of knowledge into these things.
I would say, I don't know if it necessarily came out of left field, but when I took on the role of marketing, doing all the marketing and PR for Fountain Square in Washington Park, which I don't know if anyone knows what those places are. They're two big civic spaces in Cincy that my organization ran. We were putting on over 600 events a year, and so I was very involved with that because it was just me. And sometimes I would doubt my own ability to be creative if it wasn't putting words on a page, because I had to put out the press release and do all of the writing, the written communication. But then there was a whole other aspect that I had to explore that went hand in hand, which was the visual components, working with the media. And after being consistent, over time, I had their ear, but then it became, am I creative enough to keep this going? Okay, if I get the cameras here, how am I going to sell this? How am I going to make this, awesome? And if I didn't have an idea, I would communicate with my team. But then I got comfortable coming up with my own crazy, shenanigans. My favorite was, not shenanigans, but, I called Fox 19 and I said, we've got this big boot yard bash I don't really know what the heck it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be country. I don't know. But my team told me, well, we got a mechanical bull just because. And I was like, awesome. Fox 19, if I can get this mechanical bull to you, will you put this in your parking lot, and will you make Frank Marzullo and Rob, your weatherman and your anchor, write it on air so we could talk about Bootyard Bash? And they were like, heck yeah, bring it on over. And it was one of my favorite things. So from that point on, I stopped doubting my ability to be creative, and I felt more comfortable. And I found myself, out on Fountain Square at 3 a.m. at our ice rink, bowling frozen turkeys with, Channel 9, to advertise whatever events we had coming up on the ice rink. Just fun little quirky stuff, and it helped my confidence. So not out of left field. I don't know if that answered your question, but
It answered more questions too.
You have like the ability to manipulate language so you can sell.
exactly.
Too. You
Exactly.
can convince. My side hustle is I'm a yoga instructor. And so I have to have great command over the language that I use in order to cue people in and out of postures safely. So that was just a way, and I often get compliments on the way that I cue, because I'll use some metaphor or something that gets the point across. So like in upward facing dog or whatever, I'll ask people to imagine that their collarbones have eyes and that the collarbones want to look up. So like creating different kinds of visual images for people. It's something that I never really thought that would, English and yoga, you don't need, one doesn't need the other, but they complement each other.
Would you like to thank our panelists?
Thank you.